Paramount has not been having a good go of it lately. In fact, if anything, I would say not only they're in decline, but they're in a spiral downward that only an acquisition could probably solve. Which is why, in a stroke of luck, you ended up with Skydance deciding that maybe it's about time we invest in somebody else so that we can continue to grow. And, since I have this pocket full of money, I might as well put it into Paramount. Well, Paramount desperately needed it, and nobody can deny that. Yet, why are we going about doing all these things that normally happen with acquisitions and mergers at a time when the whole reason you acquired this company was to, keep some of the institutional knowledge? Well, we can definitely ask that question at the end, but for now, let's take a look at what they're going to do over at Paramount before this thing gets done. As you can see here, Paramount Global to cut 15% of the US-based workforce for some reason. Co-CEO Chris McCarthy confirms this, and Dade Hayes writes about it over at Deadline. And as we read through this article, well, let's analyze what we find. You see, Paramount Global CEO Chris McCarthy, or co-CEO, confirmed that the long-expected layoffs hitting the company was going to hit about 15% of the workforce. Speaking on the company's second quarter earnings call, the executive said marketing and communications would be one of two areas to be targeted in the reductions. The other will be support functions, including legal, finance, and other areas of the company's administrative operations, which makes complete sense. Obviously, you already have a lot of these roles already filled over at Skydance. You're not going to need them going forward. And, to lay some of those folks off to make room for, well, whoever is going to be placed there makes a lot of sense. Now, the layoffs are actually going to be taking place in the coming weeks and will largely be completed by the end of the year. So at least people know they need to get their resumes out there. They need to talk to their friends. They need to go into their good old boys network, because if you don't think that exists in Hollywood, it absolutely does. Believe me. And he says, as you can imagine, these are difficult decisions to make. We have incredibly talented people at Paramount, and these actions are not reflections of their contributions. Rather, they are necessary to transform our organization for the future. In other words, we need to make it so it's very easy for Skydance to integrate with us and then, change our culture, because Skydance is not going to be able to help themselves. Maybe that'll help Paramount in the long run, but we'll have to see. Prior to McCarthy's comments, Paramount released a second quarter earnings report with some upbeat aspects, but a glaring statistic: $5.98 billion. That's the amount of write-down that the company took on its cable networks during the quarter, ahead of the pending merger deal with Skydance. The point of the move was to resize the value of the linear TV holdings at the company, something that Warner Brothers Discovery had just done a day earlier with their write-down of $9.1 billion, which was probably kind of helpful. The cuts had first been signaled officially in June when McCarthy and two other execs in the Paramount office of the CEO, George Cheeks and Brian Robbins, announced that they had identified $500 million in annualized cost savings. Several weeks earlier, when Skydance made its proposal to the merger with Paramount, it said it saw $2 billion in cost savings in the combination. And those are going to be realized through people, honestly, most of them anyway. And that's kind of another reason why they have to realign what they have versus what Skydance has. And if you don't think they've been talking about this for weeks, you're deluding yourself. The only question is, what will be the ramifications here? And will they get rid of people? It doesn't sound like it, but will they get rid of people that are not prepared to, take up, the other company's mantle? Because it's quite possible you get rid of somebody who can make this rejoin work. So getting rid of personnel early sometimes is a mistake during an acquisition and merger. You really should assess what'll happen long term, even if it costs you a quarter of maybe your proposed growth dynamic. Hard to say. Barring any late arriving offers during the go shop mode that they're currently in, the Skydance agreement, which ends a minute before midnight on August 21, The David Ellison run company will enter a regulatory review process. The parties have said the close of the transaction will be targeted for the first half of 2025, which means it'll roll probably into the next quarter of the next fiscal year for Skydance. And whether or not you care about any of that, accounting mumbo jumbo or any of that other stuff, all it really means is everything they intend to do will be done by the end of the first quarter of 2025 for Skydance, not for Paramount. There are a lot of questions going around, and I'd like to pose some of my own. Will this actually, as rumored, end up with Paramount Plus being shopped around to somebody else? And if so, as what? And if so, how? And if so, what of the material that's currently governed by Paramount would actually be available for license, ownership, et cetera, et cetera? Will you be able to use the name? Will you have to change it? Are you going to have access to this enormous catalog and so on and so on? It's quite the list. And it really is only governed by the kind of deal and to whom they market it to and or who decides to buy it. Current favorite in the paddock would be Peacock or Comcast Universal, which makes a lot of sense. It would certainly expand their catalog and give them something that they didn't get in Fox. But at the same time, to what extent would they have any kind of ownership, and to whom would they be paying any kind of money? Well, certainly it's not going to be National Amusements, and certainly it's not going to be Paramount. So my guess is it's going to be Skydance that they're writing checks to. But again, this catalog could be up for grabs in its own form, maybe over at Warner Brothers Discovery, who actually did make a play for Paramount along the way. It just was never going to happen. Just as it was never going to happen that Byron Allen would end up with them, or even, that crazy fella Barry was going to pick them up at the end of the day. Because I don't think Diller had the ability to pull off the deal and or hold everything else together if he'd even actually succeeded. On that note, I'm just curious what you think. So let me know your thoughts on this particular aspect of the merger. And of course, all the layoffs that seem to come with any one of these deals. Just let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Let me know if you like these kinds of videos down there as well. Hit the thumbs up button regardless, which I really appreciate. And double check that you're still subscribed. Because for whatever reason, YouTube is unsubscribing people for me again at an accelerated rate, trying to prevent me from getting to 25K, which I really want to do, and I can with your help. On that note, be sure to take care of yourself. Take care of others. And until next time, see ya.